After seeing the coronavirus situation unfold, our next guest recently said, "Governments are facing a once-in-a-lifetime chance to transition to clean energy." Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, has had a clear message to governments since the earliest days of the pandemic. Do not waste this chance. Mr. Birol had a chat with visiting professor at King's College, Mr. Nick Butler.
I'm delighted to welcome to this session Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. Fatih is someone who has given that organization over the last decade the authority and the reach that have made it one of the most respected and trusted of all the family of international institutions. And that's a great tribute to him and his staff. It's a source of facts, it's a source of great objective analysis and of serious, unvarnished projections of the future. We're going to talk for a few minutes now, and let me start, Fatih, by asking you, when the history of the energy industry is written in 100 years' time, do you think that 2020 will be seen as the turning point, a moment when the world really changed direction and trajectory in terms of the energy it was using and recognized all the challenges? Or is it just a blip driven by harsh circumstances, after which we'll just come back to the path we were on before?
Thank you very much, Nick. First of all, to you and the ONS colleagues to invite me. And I fully agree with you, Nick, that it would have been much better, of course, to be in Stavanger like the previous years, but it is what we can do under circumstances. Now, I believe that this is the COVID crisis we had and we have, and maybe it will be with us for some time to come, may well be a game changer. There are many things that are on the table, but I want to highlight two things what COVID tells me and should tell, I believe, to all of us. The first one is, you mentioned, Nick, that we can, through this teleconference, we can join to this meeting. I can tell you that the first thing COVID tells me and should tell all of us, that how essential energy is, how essential electricity is. In these very difficult times in the past months, we have understood, for example, electricity, how critical the electricity is for all of us. We could do this communication. We could call our friends, colleagues, families. The hospitals could carry out their essential duties. Not only electricity, the food coming to markets driven by trucks, which were fueled by oil. Let's do not forget it. If those trucks didn't bring the food, vegetables, cheese, bread to the markets, by using energy, the life would have been much more difficult. Or the masks. I mean, this is, we are at the IEA, we all carry masks. I'm sure everywhere it is the same. Or the sanitizers we use to clean our hands, they are the products of the petrochemical industry. So I think the first thing COVID told us, underlined the fact that energy is essential for our social life, for our economic life, for our livelihood. This is the first thing that comes to my mind. Second thing, as a result of COVID, I think our horizon, how we look at the energy, economy, life, and nature, reminded us how critical the environment is, clean energies. And what I see, it comes at a time when the many clean energy technologies costs are plummeting, number one. Number two, when many energy industries, companies are committing themselves to reduce their emissions, putting radical challenges, radical targets to reduce their emissions. Many governments around the world putting targets to reduce emissions, some of them net zero 2050. The economics work, many clean energy technologies. On the government side, political side, we see more determination, and energy industry, not all of them, but several of them are going through a transformation. Putting all these three things together, plus the change in the mindset of many people around the world, we may well see 2020 being a milestone for the energy sector and the steps that we are going to take in the next years to come.
What do you think are the key indicators that we should look for now as to whether this transition is really beginning to take off? What will you be watching among all the massive data that you see all the time? What to show that this change that you hope for, and I hope you're right, is actually occurring?
Thank you, Nick. This is a very good but a very difficult question as well. So there are many indicators, but if I have to pick one of them, it is the following. This year, 2020, global emissions declined very sharply that we have never seen in the history, the biggest decline in the history. Now, the question is, and this is happening because the economy is in a downturn, confinement measures and others. The question is, with the economic recovery, these emissions will see a major rebound and go back to the levels before COVID or higher, or the world will be able to see a structural decline of the emissions, continuation of this decline. This is for me the key issue, because when we look at the history, and we should to learn from the history, as a professor in the King's College, I'm sure you teach your students the history of energy, Nick. For example, after the financial crisis 2008, 2009, we have seen a major decline of the emissions. But 2010, the year after, with the economic recovery, global emissions rebound, and that increase in 2010 is still the largest increase of emissions in the history. Now, 2021 or 22, are we going to see the same rebound in the emissions, or as a result of the government measures, we are going to see the current very low CO2 emissions will be at the same level and continue to decline? And here, the critical issue is the many governments are putting together recovery packages, stimulus packages. What kind of energy policies they are going to prefer, put incentives or disincentives for certain energy sectors, will be critical to see whether or not we see a rebound of the emissions as we have seen in the year 2010, or we will see the continuation of the decline of the emissions. This is a key metric we are going to follow and see to understand the future of our climate change battle.
Okay, that's very interesting. You mentioned the history. I've been reading the history of the IEA.
Oh, lucky you.
No, it's fascinating.
I should say maybe poor you, so it's a long history, yes.
It's fascinating. And of course, it began as an institution dedicated to energy security in the aftermath of the oil embargoes in the 1970s. And I wonder, now we have an age of plenty in energy supply, prices at historic low levels, production shut in by OPEC and other people, glut of gas and so on. And as you said, a dramatic fall in renewable costs, which makes them plentiful as well. What do you define as energy security now? What is that? The old agenda has clearly gone.
Yeah. So,
but are we secure now that there is plenty or not?
So, Nick, this is, I mean, for me, energy security in big terms is in general terms, is the ability to provide energy services, uninterrupted energy services to citizens of the world. This is the overall definition for me. It was like that 1974 when IEA was founded, and it is still the same. But as you mentioned, it changed a lot. At that time, the geopolitical concerns were the number one, maybe the only concern. But now, even though geopolitical concerns are still there, only a few months ago we talked about the world talked about if the Strait of Hormuz were to be closed, which is a passage of about 20 million barrels per day, what will be the implications? Still an issue. But as you rightly mentioned, putting these geopolitical issues for a moment aside, there are other energy security issues coming in the picture. In the 1970s, 1980s, people were talking to increase the share of coal in the electricity generation in order to secure uninterrupted electricity energy services. But now, today, we are discussing in an era where there is a coal phase out, and we have many countries in the electricity mix where it is replaced more and more by solar, wind, which are, as we know, intermittent energy sources. How we are going to make sure that the electricity is secure. So in my view, while the oil security still remains a concern because of the geopolitical issues, maybe some extreme weather events and so on, the energy security is more and more related to electricity security, as we have seen very recently, for example, in California. So we are, therefore, IEA, while we keep a close eye on the oil security, we are more and more engaged electricity security, because we know and we hope that the share of renewables, solar and wind, onshore wind and offshore wind, will increase their shares in the global electricity mix. But this gives us, or the policymakers, the task of how to make sure that they are integrated in our power systems in the right way without causing any problems in the electricity markets. Another one is I think it is a key issue. It will be more of an issue in the next years to come, is the cyber security, which is very much linked to electricity security as well. So energy security is still an issue, in my view, but it is changing its definition slightly, its components slightly, compared to when IEA was founded in 1974.
Right. Do you think that it's now obviously inseparable you can't take apart energy from the environmental agenda,
yes,
particularly around climate change. Do you see the role of the IEA expanding in order to bring some international coherence to climate change and other environmental policies, where energy is the cause of the problem and has to be part of the solution?
Definitely so, Nick, because we can, as you say in English, we can run but not escape from the fact that the 80% of the emissions causing climate change from the energy sector. So we have every energy person has a big responsibility here. Without fixing the problem in the energy sector, we have no chance whatsoever to fix our climate problem. It is the reason why I put the climate change at the heart of the IEA work. And many of you may know that right after the COVID crisis, we were the first one, undoubtedly the first one who that said clean energy should be at the heart of the global economic recovery efforts. And here, for me, the important thing is to have a global view, because we know that 1 ton of CO2 going to atmosphere from Oslo, or let's say Stavanger, or from Detroit, or from Jakarta, or from Paris, or from Osaka, it has the same effect on everybody. Therefore, it is extremely important to not to only focus on certain countries, certain sectors, but have a global view. It is what IEA is doing, and it is the reason why we have recently, in the last few years, brought all the key emerging countries under the roof of the IEA family, countries like China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, and others. I think our biggest challenge would be to accelerate the clean energy transitions, especially in those countries where the bulk of the emissions will come from. And I am very determined IEA will lead this global clean energy transitions effort.
We're in an age of nationalism around the world, more, I think, than any time in my lifetime. You talk about this, and you're absolutely right, as a global problem. Do you find it, or let me put it another way, are you optimistic that there can be global diplomatic solutions to these obvious challenges, or do you feel that it'll be settled by coalitions of the willing? And I think I do not envy your role as an international diplomat in the current climate of rhetoric and abuse between one country and another. Can you work through that?
Yes, it is extremely difficult, but I believe technical expertise and the trust many governments around the world have for the IEA will help to bridge that gap between the countries. We are doing our best to show the countries around the world that they need to focus on clean energies and put the environment as a part of their policy agenda. In some countries, climate change is the most important concern in terms of environment. In others, air pollution is a key concern, especially when you go to Asia. When we talk with the Asian ministers, decision makers there, the hook there in many cases air pollution, but the solutions we suggest to them, the implementation of the policies we carry out with them in terms of addressing the air pollution are helping also reducing the emissions causing climate change. So it is the reason we are a technical organization. We will stay as a technical organization, but we are aware of the the difficulty, especially these days when there's a lot of geopolitical tensions among the key countries around the world. But I am very happy to tell you that, just give an example why I am hopeful. I have invited 40 energy ministers around the world to talk about the clean energy transitions on 9th of July, only last month. And we have 40 ministers under the topic of how do we accelerate the clean energy transitions came to IEA meeting, attended the IEA meeting ranging from US minister, Canada, Brazil, Colombia, all European ministers, Chinese minister, India, Japanese, South African, all of them, 40 of them were here. And again, they came to respond to our invitation to discuss the clean energy transitions. So this was a very important indicator for me that there is a political willingness. And in my view, many of the clean energy options are not only there to address the climate change or environmental problems we are facing today, but they also help those countries' economies, and in these days, to create jobs, and in some cases, in some technology options, such as the hydrogen, such as the CCUS, give a relative advantage in terms of their industrial strategy for the next option, next industry, next energy technology to be visible, who will be the front runner there. And therefore, I am rather hopeful here. And what makes me hopeful is again the many governments' determination, and at the same time getting cheaper and cheaper costs of clean energy technologies.
Fatih, I think we've reached the end of our time, but it is tremendous to hear you being so optimistic. And I now understand why, like me, you are a Manchester United fan. We live on optimism.
I support the Manchester United as one of my second teams, and I am very happy that I am supporting my football team, Galatasaray. And thank you very much for this great opportunity to discuss with you, Nick. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Fatih, thank you for joining us on the ONS Digital event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.